special new face to join us here. We've got, let's see, Katie. Oh, I don't see Katie. Is she joining us?
You got Nathan.
We're gonna get, oh yeah, I'm going through the list here. I'm going through order here. So we got Dave, Rob, Nathan's here. Good, Nathan, another new face here. Welcome. And yep, and that's it. And then me, of course. Yeah, 8. So, so I guess I'm surprised. I wonder if Katie or Larry know about this, and we can talk about time. When we get to miscellaneous to see what works. We're just testing out like what we've talked about in some of the other meetings as far as trying to move meetings up. So if the consensus is to keep it this way, we'll do that. If there's more, we could do that. I'm going to, let me see, I'm going to just text Larry and Katie and say hi, that we're meeting now, just in case they thought it was later.
Larry's probably cooking us dinner and we just missed the invitation to come over and visit him.
Yeah. All right. Okay, I sent them a message, so hopefully they'll join. All right, well, I'm ready to get started here, so we'll kick it off. We're live. So let's get started with the Tuesday, May 4th meeting of the Admin Public Works Committee. And again, welcome to our new members of the committee. You'll realize that we have a lot of fun here. We wrestle with some very challenging topics at times. So be ready to be definitely excited about some of the stuff we'll be working through here. So let's get into roll call. Carla?
Sure. Chair Garitano,
Here.
Councilmember Bertolino,
Here,
Councilmember Roast, Councilmember Dodwell.
Here she
Uh,
is.
Hi, Katie.
Hi.
Councilmember Edens,
Here.
Councilmember Hopper,
Here.
Councilmember Nyhan,
Here.
Councilmember Rambo.
Here. Okay, and just for Councilmember Dodwell, if you could turn on your video just to, because when we do roll call votes, we do have to have video on, but otherwise you're okay the rest of the time. Oh, you're on mute now. If you just.
I was trying to turn my video on. It was not being kind to me this morning or this evening.
All right, Councilmember Dodwell is here, present.
Yes.
So, all right, thanks for the roll call here. So the next item on the agenda is the election of the committee chair. So with this, I'll see if there's any nominations from the group here. I see Councilmember Bertolino with his hand up, and then Laura and Councilmember Edens.
I'd like to nominate Joe Garantano.
Okay, so we have a nomination and a second by Councilmember Edens. Is there any other nomination at this time, or? All right, seeing none. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Any oppose? Any abstain? All right, the motion passes. Thank you so much for that. I will try to do a good job here, keep us moving, make these meetings efficient and get work done. All right, next on the agenda is a motion for approval of the minutes from the April 13th meeting. Motion made by Councilmember Edens. Is there a second? So a second for Councilmember Bertolino. Okay. So any questions or comments on the minutes from April 13th? All right, all those in favor say aye.
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 Okay, any oppose? Any abstain?
I abstained since I wasn't there.
Okay, so we got 3 abstentions. Councilmember Nyhan, Councilmember Hopper, and Councilmember Dodwell.
Mhm.
So let's see, do we have, yeah, we have plenty to make the motion pass. The rest, Bertolino, myself, Edens, and Rambo here. So the motion passes. All right, we have any public participation? Seeing none, we'll move on then. I don't see anyone on the chat. Haven't received any communications. All right, we're going to move into, let's see. Public Works, we have no for information items. We do have a for action item. The first item is the contractor proposal for the 2021 tree planting. So I'm going to assume that is Rick.
Yes, thank you, Chair Garitano. Council members, those of you who were with us last month are aware we discussed this very item. Unfortunately, I'm bringing it back to you as the recommendation for the tree planting contractor ran into some difficulties. Last month, I had made a recommendation for us to move forward with a contractor, STL Tree Pros, for spring tree planting only. So when we started talking with them about getting actually a signed contract, it was made aware that they could not meet our minimum insurance requirements. We discussed with them possibly allowing lower insurance requirements. Even so, they wanted to up their bid to about $268 a tree. So at that point, I felt like the recommendation really didn't make sense. And so I'm bringing it back to you tonight, essentially to recommend going with the second lowest bidder, which was Gamma Tree Service for spring tree planting only at this time. But I would note that Gamma was also the lower bid or the lowest bid for the larger size trees. So it's very possible we'd like to maybe go with them in the fall as well. But at any rate, what I'm bringing back to you is a change in my prior recommendation. Now we're recommending moving forward with a contract with Gamma Tree Service for spring tree planting. This would be for the not to exceed amount of $20,000. It is an increase, unfortunately. Just didn't find that the prior contractor was being very direct with us. And since we hadn't worked with them previously, I just didn't feel comfortable going with them any further. So we have worked with Gamma before. They did a tree planting project a couple of years ago for us, and we were very pleased with them at that time. And I should also note that they are a right-of-way maintenance contractor with us currently. So there should be no issues as far as the insurance requirements on their part. So that is the recommendation from the department tonight, is to go forward with Gamma Tree for spring tree planting only at this point in time. And with that, I'm available for any questions.
Thanks, Rick. That seems fairly straightforward. Any questions? See Councilmember Rambo.
Yeah, real quickly. Rick, since we talked about this last month, it's come to my attention that there's a real shortage of container grown nursery stock just nursery stock in general this spring for some reason, and that we may not get or may not we may not have the ideal species available to us. And so we'll have to do secondary species. And I'm wondering how much thought anyone has given to that. If you have a list of the actual trees that we've chosen to plant, that would be handy, or something like that. I would hate to put in things that just kind of work for the price of of what we wanted. Can you talk about that? You may already be aware of that shortage.
Well, yeah, Andy Berg has been on top of that issue, and he has made a contact with the nursery that's up there at Creve Coeur Park. Is that Forest Keeling or the?
Forest Keeling is out in Ellsbury, I think.
It's not them. It's the other ones that are right there at Creve Coeur Park.
Man. Yeah, I know where
Forest Relief.
Okay.
So he has identified container stock at Forest Relief some, I don't know, probably 6 weeks ago or thereabouts, and has it on hold for us. And if everything works out, we should be in good shape. But that's been the plan, because he recognized that pretty early on. So he called up there and has identified the trees that he wants, and they are holding them for us at this time. I can let me talk to Andy, and I will get you that list, that specific list. I believe he can do that.
Yeah, I talked to him in passing about that very topic, and these are acceptable but not ideal species. And I just want to make sure we don't lose sight of that in the fall, if we're, or next year, if we're going to do more planting, remember that we've put in an abundance of, let's say, bald cypress is one that sticks in my mind. It's not an ideal street tree for some of the places we're putting it, particularly as a replacement for ash. And so I think it's more, we probably need to get some trees in. This is the best we can do, but it's not ideal.
Well, I would say in some of those conditions, we do have some very wet locations. And so
Okay.
that bald cypress, I'm very sure is exactly why that's chosen, was because of these locations that are very, very moist and damp. But nonetheless, I'll be glad to have him follow up with you about the specific tree species that he's going with.
Sure, and moist and damp, because it's in a natural area, a spongy area, that's what bald cypress is made for. But if it's moist and damp because it's one of those hard pan buckets full of clay with some soil in it, like we have some places in excavated areas, that's not good. I'm not trying to second guess Andy. I more was interested in making sure that we're all aware that these species are not the ones that we originally wanted. And if we talk about this next year, we should endeavor to straighten that out or redirect. That's all.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to follow up and just let you know that Andy has come out and inspected all these sites individually and tested them and checked the soil and the moisture conditions for every one of these sites. So he's been very helpful. And I guess we're trying our best to be sure we're picking the best for these.
Didn't think otherwise. It just, I'm telling everybody that we're putting in bald cypress, and we don't have a lot of those around here, and we probably want to go back to our first choices instead of our second choices. That's all. So I'll shut up now. Thank you.
All right, I've got two hands up. I've got Councilmember Edens and then Councilmember Dodwell. So we'll start with Edens now and then move on.
Yes, I just wanted to say, Rick, I think you made a good decision to switch contractors, and I just want to validate what Rob said. I'd love to learn more about the trees, but the price is the price that we've been quoted, and this sounds like the right contractor. So I'd like to make a motion to proceed with Gamma Tree Experts for an agreement for 2021 spring planting not to exceed the amount of $20,000.
Okay, so we've got a motion on the floor by Councilmember Edens. Councilmember Dodwell, was your hand up also regarding a motion, or did you want to speak?
I had a quick question just to catch up.
Okay, let me get the second on the
Sure.
motion. I think I see Dr. Rambo with his hand up, so I will let him be the second. So we'll go to you, Councilmember Dodwell.
Since I'm just getting in on this, do you have a list of the trees that you could share with me, Rick, since I don't see it with the documentation in this agenda?
No, and I apologize. I should have thought far enough ahead to provide you with that list. I will ask Andy Berg, our arborist, to provide that, and I can forward it to everyone.
Okay.
Very shortly.
And then would it be more cost effective or prudent for us to go ahead and have all of them planted or ordered and set aside for us now so that the prices don't go up and or we get the selection of what we want? I don't know if nurseries will hold on to them through the summer and water them for us or not.
Well, I would say the bid that we put together I forget when we opened bids, April or March, is good through this year. So that's the expectation. We laid it out for a spring and a fall planting, so we plan to come back in the fall and plant in the neighborhoods. So that price should be good. Now, I've said it before, and I do believe Councilman Rambo is correct. We're going to be fighting with other municipalities and everyone else trying to get trees, and it's going to be an ongoing thing, and we just need to do our homework and be prepared and make sure we are getting our request in as early as possible. So and I think Andy's aware of that as well, so we'll start working on that as soon as we get this project started, I guess.
Okay, thank you for the update.
All right, I don't see any other hands up, so we've got the motion on the floor. If there isn't any other question, then we'll go ahead and do a voice vote, but before I do, is everyone clear on the motion? All right, so all those in favor, say aye.
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 Any oppose? Any abstain? All right, that motion passes.
Thank you.
All right, now next on the Public Works for action number 2, the proposed purchase of a 2021 Chevy Colorado pickup. I assume that's you, Rick, as well.
Yes, it is. Chair Garitano, thank you very much. Council members, we do have in our budget a item for purchase of new vehicles, and we have 35,000 programmed in the budget for 2021. So that money was earmarked, at least in my mind, to replace a 2010 model pickup truck that's been driven by the Public Works Department since that time that we originally purchased it new. That vehicle is getting a little old at this point and is showing its age. It has provided good service, but we'd like to replace it at this point with a new vehicle. And so that's the request to you tonight. We do participate in the state cooperative purchasing program, so that's where the bid comes from. The state gets all those bids, and we just piggyback on that program. That's what we've done previously when we've purchased new vehicles, to my knowledge. So that is the plan with this bid. John Brown Chevrolet is the local dealer that participates in that program. So the Chevy Colorado would be similar to what we're driving right now. We would equip it ultimately with a salt spreader and a snow plow on the front, with the idea that we could use it for snow plow work in the wintertime as well, as it's been done with the Chevy that's been used to this point. So the recommendation is to move forward with the purchase of the Chevy Colorado. The quote is for the vehicle is just under $30,000, well, $29,400 some dollars. And I should point out, they're telling us this is actually a 2022, that they have actually moved on to the 2022 model. So I need to correct that with you. It would not be a 2021, it'd be a 2022 model. So with that, I'll certainly address any questions that you might have at this time.
All right, before we do, it looks like we have City Administrator Steve Cross that wants to say something.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to add to what Rick has pointed out. He and I had a discussion this morning with regards to the vehicle that we are replacing. It is a 2010 model, and we've looked at a couple of scenarios in terms of what we might do regarding keeping that model, keeping that particular unit, or disposing of it. As far as keeping it, we had a discussion that potentially, since it is equipped with a snowplow, that potentially it could be kept and just used in the winter as an additional unit for snow plowing. However, as Mr. Brown pointed out earlier, it is showing its age. And what I cautioned him is I don't want to keep something if it turns into a money pit where it's going to require a lot of money for repairs. His current thinking right now is that we would not keep it and we would dispose of it. It doesn't have much trade-in value, so we would dispose of it outright, sell it to the public. We have done that in the past, and we would get whatever we could get, whatever the current market value is for a 2010 model with 90 or 90 some odd thousand miles on it. So that would be the plan, would be just simply to put it out there and sell it. Unless one of you all have a need for a 10-year-old, 11-year-old truck with a snowplow and 92,000 miles on it. And if so, we'll make you a great deal.
If you want to start the snow plowing business, this is your opportunity.
All right, well, I'll ask if we have a motion. So Councilmember Dodwell, you got your hand up.
Got a motion. I have a motion and a question.
Go for it. Sure, make the motion. Let's get that on the floor.
I'll make a motion that we make the purchase.
All right, so making the purchase as recommended by the department. Is there a second on that motion? Made by Councilmember Nyan. All right, so go ahead with your question.
You said putting a snowplow on the existing one. We've already got the snowplow on that, right? And the salt?
We have the salt spreader and a snow plow. Yes, we do. And if you're asking whether it could be transferred,
That's my question. You
my
guessed.
understanding is it wouldn't be able to, but we'll check into that. This purchase does not include the spreader and the plow itself. So this is just strictly the truck at this point in time. But we'll have to make that judgment. But again, the spreader and the plow are also the same age, from my understanding. So they get pretty beat up over time as well.
Okay.
All right, Councilmember Hopper, you have your hand up. You gotta unmute.
Sorry, screen switch. So I'm sure you guys took account of this, but I know that we're going from a Silverado 2500 to a Colorado. That's a pretty substantial difference in truck. I just was curious about the rationalization of making it much of a step down from basically a heavy duty truck to almost a mid-size type of vehicle.
Well, that's a good question, and I asked that as well, and because I wanted to be sure that we didn't feel like we needed a larger truck. It is a little bit of a step down, not much in terms of overall size, but I am assured that we can equip this and use it for snowplow as necessary. And again, we use our trucks in the winter for snowplow operations, but they're really intended to supplement the contractor's forces. So we've typically been able to have a couple trucks out, and they do come in very handy. So we certainly like to have that option in the future. But again, I think we feel that we're not going to be having any diminished capacity for snowplow by using the Colorado truck. I think we're still able to provide that capability with this purchase.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any other questions for Rick? Okay, so we've got a motion on the floor. Does anyone need it repeated? Otherwise, it's thing as we just mentioned, as recommended by the department, moving forward with the purchase. Carly, you good with that?
Yeah.
All right. Well, all those in favor say aye.
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 Any
Aye.
opposed? Any abstain? All right, that motion passes. All right, moving on, the third item under Public Works, we have the federal funding agreement for the Route 109 at BA South Roundabout Project.
And thank you, Chair Garitano. I think most of you council members are aware of the fact that last year we did put in a application for federal funding for a project to construct a new roundabout at the intersection of Route 109 and BA at the south junction there, not the north junction, but the south junction. We were notified earlier this year or last year that we were successful. So this is basically taking the first step towards beginning that project. So to actually obtain the federal funding, we have to enter into a program agreement with MoDOT to acquire those funds. So this is the approval of that program agreement. And we have to do that and take that step to get the monies that are administered through MoDOT. They're from the federal government, but MoDOT administers the program. So again, the recommendation from the department is to move forward to execute the federal aid program agreement to acquire the federal funding. And the amount that we're getting through the agreement is $1,360,000, and that is 80% of our eligible cost of the total estimated cost of $1.7 million. So it's an 80-20 program. The monies would be available for construction of the improvement in 2023. So we'll, assuming we move forward with this project, we will start the process of hiring a consultant to do the engineering, and we'll prepare the plan and have it ready for construction in 2023. So if there are any other questions, I'll be glad to take them at this time from the committee.
All right, so Rick, you're going to be looking for a motion with the proceed with the department's recommendation for the execution of the agreement.
That's correct, Chair Garitano.
All right, I see Councilmember Dodwell with her hand up.
Also move and thank Rick once again for doing such a great job of filling out these grant applications and the whole process. Thank you, sir.
All right, is there a second on that motion there for the roundabout? Councilmember Bertolino? Okay, Councilmember Edens, you got your hand up.
I do. I just have a question from page 26. What does it mean when it says that if the public doesn't support it, another plan has to be done? Like if you get a certain threshold of complaints or you have a open house, what does that mean?
Councilmember Edens, usually the requirements of the program, the program requirements mean that we have to engage the public to some degree. And typically with each project, we will hold an open house public meeting. That specific clause, now that you've referenced it, I would expect that that would be the case.
I think I wrote the page number incorrectly. I apologize. Let's see. It just stuck in my mind, and I thought, wow, that's interesting. Oh, and I say that because, and I've shared this with you before, I have a few residents that say, I don't want any more roundabouts, and I don't want to be a roundabout city. But everything I've heard about traffic control is it's quite efficient and eliminates wrecks. So I just thought, what happens if those residents complained enough, if that would be enough to force a change?
Yeah, honestly, I'm not familiar with that specific requirement in the agreement, so I'd love to follow up with you on that.
Okay, yeah, I'll continue to look, and if I find it again, I'll just put it. Oh, there it is. Okay, so it's on under the page that says Exhibit A. It looks like it's page 3 of the attachment, but it doesn't follow the page numbers, and it says if the public does not support the construction of a roundabout, the city shall prepare an alternate concept, which shall be subject to the commission's approval, etc.
Okay, yeah. So
So they would withhold the money then as well?
I guess they are allowing that possibility if for whatever reason the project does not get public support, and I don't think they're talking about one person, they're talking about strong general support.
Okay.
For whatever reason, the city's desire to move forward isn't shown to be supported by the public. It looks like they are providing an out, whereas we would have to address that to the best of our abilities, potentially propose a concept that might be more agreeable. So I don't know, I've seen that in the agreements before. That looks like something that might be actually new.
Yeah, I don't ever remember reading that. And it's just, that's such a broad phrase, public does not support, because we usually get people, maybe 4 or 5 that speak against something, but then you often have a silent majority that's in favor that never comes and talks, right? We don't hear, hey, you're doing a great job. We only hear, hey, I have a problem with this. So I just wouldn't want 1 or 2 people to derail a great project. I normally read what you give me. I've just never seen it before either. So I just wanted to make the committee aware of that, and that's all I got.
All right, Councilmember Nyan.
I would hope on this roundabout, I know I've heard the same thing, Lauren, from people telling me they get dizzy going down 109. But I would think at this particular roundabout, because I know there's been at least 1 fatality, many accidents, probably more than any other roundabout. I mean, I don't have those facts and figures, but I would hope that because of that, this would be supported more than any of the others. And I think people would make an exception and, not mind to have another one. So hopefully it won't be an issue.
Yeah, it's come up. That's a good point from people that is an intersection they'd like to see something improved. Good point. I don't see any other hands up. So again, we've got, I believe we do have a motion on the floor. Yes, Councilmember Dodwell and Bertolino made the motion. Carla, right? Is that?
Yes.
Okay. Seeing no other hands up, all those in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstain? All right, the motion passes. All right, so moving on, we are moving into now administration. We've got 4 items under for action. There are none under for information. So the first item under for action is workplace training. I'm going to probably refer to Councilmember Edens on this one. Came from her request and would know and be most knowledgeable about the desire to pursue this.
Yeah, so it really came about two ways. Is one from two residents that contacted myself and Dawn that had concerns, and then also one of the things I found out, that when we were working on harassment policies as a city, that we probably needed to incorporate some of the good practices of the private sector. So, we're not in the business of making profits, but certainly if corporations are doing a best practice and have been for over a decade, and we can incorporate it, then we should. And also other, public institutions do this as well. So when I was an employee of the University of Missouri system, I did have to take online training programs and just complete them. So I kind of looked at what overall packages would be, and it seemed like a good time that while we were discussing things that elected officials could be doing, to talk about maybe things that staff is doing at the same time. So I did approach City Administrator Cross, and we had a super productive conversation. And one of the things that I noticed was that we have a significant gap in HR training across the board. Part of that is we don't have a traditional style HR department. So it's a really good opportunity to make our city proactive and not reactive. We don't want to ever end up in the future having some sort of EEOC complaint. And there are restrictions about what we can force elected officials to do, but we can certainly use kind of the carrot model. So if we provide training for elected officials and essentially make a statement that we value this in the workplace, then we can, put on our bio or contact information that Councilmember Garitano is, participated in our HR compliance training. And Mr. Cross may find that there are different programs that he'd rather have a manager or department director participate in, as opposed to just an employee that is under someone. And so what I was hoping to do today was kind of, have a discussion and proceed in the future with a staff recommendation and any pricing. If it's under a certain threshold, the city administrator can authorize it as well. It's just if we're already looking at doing a program for elected officials, it makes sense at the same time to kind of do it for staff. So what I put together were just some resources that I was aware of that the private sector is using in the St. Louis area. So there's certainly other things available, and I didn't have a number that I was working with in terms of budget, but again, we want to be proactive and not reactive. So there's comprehensive things that we can be doing, and we should be doing as elected officials and employees and employers.
Okay. And by the way, Councilmember Brost, I think, may have joined us by phone possibly. So I'm going to make sure if that's him, we can make sure he's able to speak if he has any comments. Yes, that's his number there. So if I think Rick, maybe you want to move him over, at least he'll be able to chime in if there's something he's interested in. All right. So with the introduction by Councilmember Edens, we'll open up certainly if there's any questions or comments, but it sounds like maybe a recommendation might be in order of having the city administrator look into and pursuing and providing his recommendation on how he would like to pursue programs like this for his staff, for the city staff, is my thinking. So is that in alignment with you, Councilmember Edens?
Yes, but not just staff, for elected officials as well.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. So, and again, as you said, elected officials, we cannot mandate that, but certainly they are able to participate if they'd like to, but there is no penalty because an elected official can only be removed by residents. So with that, Councilmember Bertolino had his hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to say I really endorse what Lauren has brought up here, and offer Steve, if you need any other support or someone to bounce ideas off of, I would be more than happy to step in. That was my career for more years than I recall. And so I would love to be involved if you have any need for some input, I'm sorry, in terms of selection different programs or such. I'd be available to you.
Thank you.
So again, I think we want to allow, Councilmember Dodwell, I'll let you go ahead and speak.
I just want to make sure that as Mr. Cross is looking at these options, that we identify resources. Lauren has given us a great number of good resources, several of which I've already gone through myself, through each of these organizations. But if there are specific ones designed for government entities, I really want to make sure that we identify those, because I do believe there are some tricks of the trade that need to be shared with staff as they are, and the managers of said staff as they are working to provide resources to our public. And I know, Lauren, that you put, excuse me, put on here that we should get a SHRM certification, but since we don't have somebody specifically assigned to HR other than our city administrator, I'm not sure that that would be something that would be critical. But if Mr. Cross wants to go through that process, I guess he can.
All right, and our city administrator does have his hand up, so I'd be interested in hearing his thoughts.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to talk specifically about the Society for Human Resource Management. And I'd like to make a clarification for the committee, if I may. We do in fact have a formal human resources department. That department consists of Carla Patrick, our recorder here, who's on this call. She is in fact our HR department. Staff knows that. So she handles payroll. She handles all aspects of HR, from benefits to anything related to HR. That is one thing that I've been working with Carla and Dawn Kaiser, her direct supervisor, in developing that HR department, because it has been somewhat of a loose organization, if you will, up until this point. But I am changing that. Carla, in fact, is a part of the SHRM. She is a member of the SHRM. So we do have an individual who is part of that organization, and Dawn and I are going to continue to develop Carla and that role as HR department for the city. We're a small staff, but that doesn't mean that we should not be following the guidelines and making sure that everyone here, all city staff, recognizes, because it has not been the case prior to me, that all HR functions went through one person and that Carla manages it. So Carla's done a great job stepping up and embracing that role. But we're not totally there yet, but we're a lot further down the road than we have been in the past. I can say that thanks to Carla.
That's fantastic to hear. I'm so proud of the efforts that have been made by both you and Carla specifically. So great news. Didn't know it. Thank you both.
All right, Dave.
Yeah, Carla, question to you. Does SHRM have I was a member of SHRM for many, many years. Does it have a specific arm of or department that is just public employees, or is that a totally separate organization? As I recall, years back, there was a public equivalent of what used to be, which is SHRM. Are you aware of that at all, Carla?
They have some courses and certifications that are more geared towards that, but I don't know that there's there might be like subcommittee type of thing that you can have certification classes and things that are more government oriented or public service oriented. but I'm not aware that there's a specific chapter or
Okay.
anything that's.
Okay, all right, thank you.
But we will look into that, Councilman Berlino. Again, this is something that we're developing and trying to expand that role. So I'm going to get into it more myself. As I say, Carla, I'm trying to develop Carla, but I could probably get involved. But we will definitely look into the SHRM and find out if they have something specific to government employees or something that would relate specifically to our group here. So
Councilmember Hopwell,
thank you for that suggestion.
go ahead.
Yeah, the only thing I was going to add is I would kind of also add a recommendation in grouping with this training is some form of cybersecurity awareness training as well. I know it's a very kind of newer topic in a lot of organizations, and most companies don't address it in a very effective manner. I've worked in it for a while, so familiar with how much companies and organizations pay very little attention to it and how vulnerable they really are. So if we're looking at doing some training courses, a couple in cybersecurity awareness, just, best email practices and things like that would probably be very beneficial.
Yeah, great recommendation, especially since we did have an issue not too long ago, I think with the email or something like that. Not that anything was compromised, but I think it was just spam or something like that.
Well, actually, Mr. Chair, the city was in fact compromised
Oh, was it?
as a result of that. And it took an awful lot of effort on the city's part to undo the damage that was done by someone clicking on a link that turned out to be a fairly malicious link. And so a lot of emails that were being sent by anybody with an extension of cityofwildwood.com were being rejected because it was identified as a virus, as spam. So it took an awful lot of effort. Now, as you recall, we put in multi-factor authorization, MFA, as a result of that. And so everyone, if you recall, this goes back about 2 months ago. We put in MFA, multi-factor authorization, then that would prevent this type of thing. And that came in handy because that same individual clicked on a bad link again today.
Oh, well, I'm glad that we have that protection now with the
We
multi-factor.
have that protection, so it didn't go anywhere. But we did have to change some passwords. So fortunately, we put in a piece of security that prevented the same type of damage that occurred a few months ago. And so
Great suggestion then on Nathan's part. So that's good. Councilmember Edens, you got your hand up.
I think that was an awesome suggestion from Councilmember Hopper. I did have a question, but it's probably not germane to the motion. So if you have to rule it out of order, that's okay. And it was.
Well, we don't have a motion yet, so
okay,
that would be good if we.
I'll make a motion then, but I'll make it after my question then, so it's not out of order. How about that? Okay, so there's been a lot of articles recently on NPR about not only businesses, but small local governments getting attacked with ransomware. And I was just hoping that we would have, even if it's not a public one, some sort of internal policy with how we would deal with ransomware. My understanding is that based on the article, a lot of corporations just end up paying it and then kind of keep it hush hush. I would certainly hope we wouldn't be in that situation. So especially because with the open budget to the public, we would be sending a message that we will pay in the future as well. So love to know more about that, but I'll go ahead and put a motion on the floor to see this again on the next agenda with a staff recommendation for HR and workplace training programs for both elected officials and our staff as well.
So you got a motion, and we'll look for a second here. If you don't mind me asking the maker of the motion, could we just validate with the city administrator? Does a month suffice, or do you need additional time to do that research as to how you'll approach the training?
Fair point.
City administrator, what do you think?
Well, I'll tell you what, why don't you go ahead and get the second out of the way, Mr. Chair, and then I have 2 points two things I'd like to discuss.
Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and then ask for a second. I see Councilmember Hopper with your hand up. I did see Councilmember Dowell, but hard to tell who had the first. So if there's no preference, we'll go with Councilmember Hopper. Let him get one in there. And all right, go ahead. Did you have something?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. With regards to your question, you asked if a month was sufficient time to do exactly what? What is it that you would like to have accomplished within 30 days?
Just a recommendation about what you've kind of picked out, because I don't know if you're asking in the future for budget authorization or if this is just a program you can do and feel comfortable authorizing that's under $10,000. So I just want to enable the next steps, and I'm not sure what you need from me.
Okay. First of all, it's not so much about what my expenditure authorization is, which is $10,000, but it's more about what is in a budget for training. And I would, first of all, want to look into that. And then secondly, I don't think 30 days is enough time to lay out plans for, in terms of what training programs we may or may not want to pursue. So at a minimum, I'd ask for 60 days to do that. But I also have to, just to look into the kind of training that might be appropriate. I do want to speak to Mr. Berlino, Councilmember Edens. I've got your information. And we've talked about a couple things here from cybersecurity, ransomware, et cetera. So if we're looking at a complete training program in terms of what we might offer, that's going to take a bit of work just to develop a whole training program. Speaking to Mr. Young to find out what training programs he may have and what other municipalities that he deals with may have. So I'd say at least 60 days, maybe, to come back with it may not be a complete program, but at least it'll give an idea of some of the things we're looking at.
Okay.
So I'd ask first of all for 60 days, but Mr. Chair, I'd like to, with your permission, because I want to make sure that there is a complete understanding. The motion talks about training for both staff and council members. And I think it's appropriate for Mr. Young to explain to the committee, in particular with regards to council members on training. And I think that's very important because since it's part of the motion, I think we need to make sure everyone is on the same page about that.
Okay, we can have the city attorney speak. There he is. He appeared.
There I am. Yes. Well, good evening, everybody. And I think it's been stated a couple of times. Councilmember Edens has stated it, and so has Chair Garitano. And really, the issue comes down to when it comes to elected officials, we can offer training, we can't mandate it because there's no repercussion for not going to the training that are within the city's purview. So that's really the gist of it. Now, that being said, I know various cities that offer various trainings. You are offered MML trainings on occasion, and many of you take advantage of those. So having it offered is fine, but just for clarification, we cannot mandate it.
Chair Garitano, I'd like to amend my motion if it's okay with a second.
Yeah, if that's okay. I see him nodding his head in agreement. So go ahead and
Yes.
to modify your motion. We're not technically amending that, right? We're how would I say, modify the motion. Is that correct, city attorney?
That's fine.
Yeah, so 60 days with up to 90 days. So even if there's, maybe not an attachment at 60 days, just a verbal update would be appreciated. How about that? But better to get it right and take the time that you need and just keep us updated in between.
Thank you for that.
Absolutely.
Okay, and the second, you're okay with that? All right, so I do see Councilmember Rambo's hand up. And again, just also, I want to make sure I'm for clarity. What we're going to expect is the city administrator, he'll do his research and then just come back with the plan. And that's when we will know if it's something he can execute this year or if it requires budgeting. It might be then the council will have to look at it either at mid-year or for 2022 budgeting. So is that correct, or maker of the motion with that, that I understand it correctly? And then we'll go to the hands. Councilmember Edens, did you hear me?
Oh, I apologize. I was just wondering, I was looking over my notes. Is Steve gonna come back with like a rollout plan and a record keeping plan between the 60 to 90 days?
Well, clarify, what do you mean by a rollout, like a deployment plan for how the training will be offered and so
Yeah.
forth?
If it's like, a once a year kind of thing, if it's twice a year, if it's progressive. So once you complete a step, you get more advanced education.
I would say let's give him as much flexibility, and maybe he comes with just a draft or thoughts as to how it is based on what he finds out. But I think it will take a little bit longer to actually formally finalize the plan and then execute it. Obviously, execution is dependent on funding, and it may have to wait until we can allocate funds for it. But that's what I'm thinking and hoping, just to give them enough flexibility to research it. And I would defer, the city administrator knows the team best as to what is the most effective way to accomplish that training. Sometimes it could be written material, it could be an online course module, it could be a video. There's so many different options out there. So I do see 3 hands up. I'm going to Councilmember Rambo, Dodwell, and Hopper. So go ahead, Councilmember Rambo.
Sure, real quickly, I should send everyone a list because I get tired of and a little embarrassed talking about all my certifications and such, but the premier security certification in the industry is called the CISSP by ISC2, and I'm a CISSP in good standing, have been for quite a while. I keep it current, and I kept my mouth shut during the last attack. I didn't know about this most recent one because nobody needed me messing around in their business. Everyone was doing the best they could. It probably could have been handled better, but that's because of the cumbersome nature of dealing with a third-party IT organization. We don't have any IT specialists in our in Wildwood in city government. I've thought for a long time that we needed something like that, but at a minimum, I'd like to suggest that we consider some sort of security evaluation, specific security evaluation, because Lauren's exactly right, and others who mentioned it. Ransomware is hot right now, and it could ruin the city government. It could cost us millions, literally. If you're going to swim in the ocean, you have to worry about sharks, but the other attacks are relatively trivial. The risks are trivial in comparison to the ransomware problem. So I don't know if I guess I'll just ask Mr. Cross directly, and also probably Mr. Young could chime in. Are we considering such action seriously, or are we? Is that not on the radar screen yet? And I'll ask Steve first.
Maybe just to keep us on track. So the motion is regarding the training that Councilmember Edens is, but that is an important topic. We may want to just have a discussion separately on that, because I do think the city administrators looking into, what is the future as far as, technology service. And I think, to your point, Councilmember Rambo, looking at, doing an audit and evaluation, making sure we're up to speed on our technology security and so forth. So I don't know. I don't want to take words out of your mouth, city administrator, but I know you mentioned just looking at things and wanting to kind of evaluate the technology landscape.
Yeah, to be clear, I was striking while the iron was hot. The topic came up. It seemed reasonable. It's been on my mind, and we can schedule it more formally. I'd be happy to see that. I just don't want it to drop off the table. So thanks.
Mr. Chair, I think the point that Councilmember Rambo brings up is a valid one and a good one. So what we can do at a minimum is get it on the agenda going forward, so that we don't lose sight of looking into these kinds of things. Chair Garitano is right in that we do have a third-party IT support vendor I'm not overly happy with them. I was very unhappy with them my first go around in this chair, and was moving towards replacing them. When I left, my successor felt differently and nothing was done. However, I have circled back with this particular vendor that I have worked with for quite a few years. But the topic itself, I mean, we don't have, you're right, a dedicated IT specialist on staff. The closest we have is Julian Jacquin, and Julian has got quite a bit of knowledge about IT things, and certainly helped out in the transition. But he has a day job. He's our economic development manager, so I try not to bother him too much with IT issues. But he's probably forgotten more than I'll ever know as it relates to IT. I know enough to be dangerous, but looking into this is a big topic, and it's a separate topic from the kind of training. So we'll get it on the agenda, and that's something that I'll just need to look into, the ransomware issue, as well as just our whole security suite, if you will, and how the city is protected with firewalls and other things. So thanks for bringing that up, sir.
All right, Katie, is that related to the same topic or different?
It's somewhat similar. I was just going to make a suggestion that we have a maybe 1 hour online presentation by AAIM or some group about ransomware. What is it? How to avoid it? If Mr. Hopper feels so inclined to give such a presentation based on the industry that he's in, I think it would behoove us now to make sure that all of our employees and our council members know about what this looks like, how to avoid it, and other things similar to it, so that we can all be protecting the city's information that each of us is responsible for. So I know we can't demand that, I guess, a council member attend a specific class, but I don't know, Mr. Young, is it possible for us to mandate that because we have city-owned property, that we have to go through some type of course on how to ensure the safety of said equipment and the data that resides on it and in our network system as a city?
I don't think that it would be unreasonable to have a requirement that if you are going to have the privilege of the use of city property, that you be properly trained on the use of that city property.
All right, so maybe Councilmember Dodwell, what we could suggest is we do have in that motion that was just passed the kind of overall technology information security type of training, but maybe an interim step is something that may just be enough for awareness. It could be as simple as an email to the council to say, look, please do not click on links you do not recognize and things like that, or a short session if we can find that. But I do think that we will be able to accomplish it when that training is identified in about 2 months or so, when Steve Cross comes back with something. So
if my concern is, if we're having problems now, some type of message, some kind of information needs to get out to people across the board to look out for.
Yeah, I think we can get
risks.
something out. We can certainly get something out, as quick as an email. We can do that, probably just getting some basic resources from our current vendor. And then some of it's just a basic reminder, it's stuff that hopefully everyone is doing right now, even with their personal, you're not clicking on a link that comes from an email you don't recognize. And, if it's suspicious, you don't want to respond to it and things like that. So we'll, we don't have to solve for it right here at this meeting. Maybe I will ask if a city administrator, and I'm happy to pursue that. And if there's anybody else that has a deep interest, because I know we've got a couple of folks that are knowledgeable about this, we can provide that input into some type of communication that goes out to everyone.
Well, I think at a minimum, given the events of today, I mean, and you all probably recall, we did send an email out and said, don't click on links you don't recognize, don't do this, and so forth. So I will pull that email back up, see if it needs to be modified in any way, shape, or form. But as a reminder, and perhaps add to it, but indicate what folks need to do, and that would go to council and the mayor and city staff about what you should or should not do. And again, the overriding rule is if you don't recognize who that's being sent to and there's a link, don't click on the link. Verify who it came from and say, is this a valid email, that came from you? So anyway, we'll reinforce that message and I will get that out right away.
All right, I think I saw two more hands before. I just want to make sure you still wishing to speak. Is it Councilmember Rambo and Hopper? Are you good or?
I'm good.
Okay, Councilmember Hopper?
Yeah, I was just going to relate to the training piece of it before, as far as an expectation of having a kind of a full rollout plan. It's just from experience with that, it's kind of hard to say that without knowing, which vendor and training program, because they're all going to be delivered differently. And some of them will actually have, depending on who you go with that provides training, some of them actually have kind of preset programs that are available and some of them don't. So it's a pretty wide spectrum on that. So I think 60 to 90 days is probably to Mr. Cross's statement earlier. It's even that might be a little tight, but should be able to get some stuff together.
Okay.
And I appreciate what Councilmember Hopper is saying, and that is my plan, is within 60 to 90 days, at least identify some, if not, most of the programs that we think might be worthwhile, and then discuss the budgetary impacts. And rather that any of that training can occur in 2021 or it needs to go into 2022. But beyond that, my expectation is not to take it much further than that. I do want input and feedback from the committee, whether the training resources that would be identified in that summary to the committee, kind of hits the mark in terms of what you all think is important. But the rolling out and the who and the when and all of that, those are details that I would not be providing in the 60 to 90 days.
Okay. All right. Are there any other comments on the topic there? So we do have, I believe we have a motion on the floor. Is everyone aware of the motion or you need it repeated? No? Okay. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstain? All right, the ayes have it. The motion passes. So we're going to move on to the next item on the agenda, another new item. So this is around electric vehicle charging infrastructure in the town center. Councilmember Rambo requested adding this. So I am going to let Councilmember Rambo introduce the item here and specify what he would like to ask of the committee as far as next steps.
Okay, I wasn't expecting that. Mr. Brown wrote his cover letter and so forth. Should I go first? I'm happy to do that, or should we let?
I do think it would be good. You're the one who had raised it, and then we can certainly let the Public Works Director talk about the details in the memo there.
Okay. The technology question is an open one. Mr. Brown actually probably has a quote. Rick, did you get a quote today? Uh-oh, you're muted. You're muted, Rick. Sorry.
Yes, thank you. Yes, I've received an email about 5:20 with a quote that is probably going to be more detailed than we can go into tonight, frankly. I'm after looking at it.
Oh.
Okay, so I'll just set the stage, and Rick can fill in the actual numerical details in a minute. Electric vehicles are coming on very, very, very strong. Everybody's making them now. There's the technology is in disarray, as often happens. There's always a tension, engineering tension between standardization and features and enhancements which lead away from standardization. And currently, there are three basic methods of charging a vehicle. You can plug it into your wall outlet as long as you have a breaker dedicated to a 15 amp or a 20 amp outlet, and charge, get 3, 4, 5, 6 miles per hour of charging in your electric vehicle. The next step is 220 volt service, like your dryer in your home, or maybe your electric range or something like that. And you can get 20 to 30 miles per hour of charging at relatively little cost, because those are both AC based, just like your home is. And the conversion to DC to go in the battery happens on the vehicle, but they can't carry around a giant transformer. And so the real juice, the quick charges, it's called fast charge generally. Those are DC based. In other words, the conversion takes place off the car, and you just shove the juice in the battery as fast as it will carry it. And it takes about 30 minutes to 80% charge, which is, it's almost as fast as, filling up your car. Those stations are pretty expensive because of all the electronics and the gear involved. So my thinking was providing level 1 charging is a no-brainer. It's just, I could do it at, go to Home Depot and pick up the equipment and do it in an hour. But it makes sense for Wildwood to potentially to put an electric vehicle charging infrastructure perhaps into our garage, or at least somewhere in town center, because the garage is right next to the hotel. There could be some clientele interested in it. It's right across from the theater, near dining, near Walgreens. And I see it as an attraction to town center and provide a little bit more much needed traffic, to the businesses down there, plus a convenience to people, because if we don't jump on it pretty soon, we'll be sort of behind the curve. And I'm looking at it as an image upgrade to a community that has crappy internet service and is getting known for being technology Luddites when we really aren't. And so I thought it's really a business development case. It costs more than a couple of grand. We need to talk about it, but I wanted to broach the subject. There's some technical information in a write-up that I did. Rick sort of condensed that down further. So that's all worth understanding, but I don't want to take up the rest of the meeting just talking about the technology. So I think the cost breakdown is a couple $100 or a few $100 for the 110 volt based systems, couple grand to maybe $5 to make it truly robust and heavy cables and strong and sturdy for a 220 volt system. And then the DC systems will be, $20,000, $30,000 for a unit. But that's with a point of sale payment and upgrades to the area. If we paint the walls white and add some security cameras and some lights and so on and so forth and make it really nice. The juice for us is that Ameren, if we do level 3, will be one of the first communities around here with level 3 charging, which is the DC stuff. And they would be thrilled to publicize that and talk about Wildwood as a leader instead of a follower. And the final point I'll make is there is a desert. These people are techno geeks, every last one of them, and they have all these apps on their phones telling them where they can charge and what type of charger it is and so on and so forth. And there is a desert on those, the graphic interface that shows there's nothing surrounding Wildwood. And there's a charger in Sullivan, but it's you pull off, spend a half hour, get charged, pull back on the road. Whereas if people wanted to drive 6 miles off Highway 44 to get to Wildwood, they could park in the town center, charge up in a half hour, walk over to Walgreens, or maybe get a pizza, or even go to a movie and get completely charged. I think it's an attraction, and that's why I think it's a business development case that might be made. So I'll let Rick talk for a second, and I'll shut up.
The only thing I was going to add, and if that's okay, Councilmember Rambo reference, we did meet with a vendor a couple times to look at the garage as a potential site for a charging station, and we did just receive a quote from a company, IBD Industrial Battery Products. The gentleman was recommended through Ameren, and Councilmember Rambo had reached out to him, and so he has provided us a cost proposal to put in. I believe it's a level 2 and a level 3 charging station in that northeast corner of the garage. So it's essentially 2 charging stations, wall mounted, or 2 stations over 3 spaces. So I believe the 1 space could be used by either charger, if I understand it correctly. But we just received this.
Yeah. So why don't you? Yeah, we might want to analyze it and make sure the quote is accurate and it's going to work. And I think at this point right now, I mean, this is just being introduced, this topic, so we're kicking the tires on it. So there's no decision really at this point because we just don't have all the details. But I think Councilmember Rambo did a fantastic introduction on the why we would be interested, and also some of the options that are available to us. And so as Councilmember Rambo brought this to my attention, I thought introducing the topic tonight, just to gauge that there is interest to just continue to move forward in the research and investing in the time to look into it. And if that's the case with the committee, then Rick will continue to move forward. And obviously he just got information, so I don't want to put him on the spot if he hasn't even had a chance to read it through. But if that's the committee's interest is, hey, this sounds good, I'm interested, let's get more details, then we can continue this, and probably at the next meeting, they'll have more details, because I do think they're going to have to look at what's the best location, the garage, or is there a visible location, a parking space in front of City Hall? And, I think it's important for everyone to know the benefits of why we would want to do this. What's the cost to the city, if there is any, because remember, there is a use of electricity. Now, some of these programs, they have where the people pay for their electrical charge. It's like $12. But I will just add, I did speak with a neighbor who has an electric vehicle, a Tesla, and I found out that there's a really good reason why we would be interested in this. And it's not just the person that's going to the movie that wants to plug in and charge, or the person that's shopping here in town center. But Rob alluded to this. When people travel cross country, they plug in their route. And just like this neighbor goes up to Chicago, they know they stop in Bloomington. And that is a popular charging station. And so that's where they stop. They get lunch, because the charge is usually about 30 minutes or so. And so for us, when I asked the neighbor, I said, well, what about in our area? Now, this is just on the Tesla side. They said in Tesla, you only go to St. Charles, or you got to go in South County. So basically anyone cutting through the St. Louis area, whether it's 64 or 44, you got to go to one of those 2 places. Wildwood is positioned right in the middle. So there's probably a chance where you're going to bring in, and remember, to the demographic around the people that own the electrical vehicles, there's opportunity to bring in some investment, some money, shoppers into the city. So it sounds interesting. I would support looking into this. Councilmember Edens, you got your hand up.
Yes, I would just say I would support it too. And when we get more information, I'll put it on the economic development agenda. Julian and I will approach the businesses and just not only to make them aware that we're considering it, but to get some feedback. I think it would be extremely helpful. I did have one other thought since I last talked to Rob. First of all, I would love to see it with some sort of charging apparatus, whether that's through an app or a credit card. If it is, we definitely want a security camera. So myself, Teresa, and Rob Jaxie were on an economic development certification on Wednesday nights. And this last week, a man from Ameren was there and was talking about just different programs, work they do as utility companies, how it relates to economic development. Anywho, one of the things he shared was, I believe it was the city of St. Louis was going to transition to an all-electric fleet for city-owned cars. I'm not going back on the truck that we just approved, even if it has gas. I'm just wondering if in the future we also need to consider vehicles that are electric that the city owns. And if so, if we think we're going to be doing that, do we want to bid for an electric charger at City Hall if it's cheaper to do two at once? Just
That's a
a
good-
thought about forward thinking in the future.
That is a good point. And actually, it's kind of interesting you say that. Marco Tipton, he's the government liaison with Ameren. He's the gentleman that was going to do the site visit at the pond substation. He wanted to talk about while we were there. Well, of course, we didn't do it because of the weather, but he said they will do a free evaluation assessment of the city vehicles. Looking at what options there are and things like that. He just mentioned that. That's something that Steve Cross and would probably want to look into and see, but it sounds like they've got some good offerings, or at least good options to do an assessment of stuff like that. All right, Councilmember Rambo, you got your hand up.
Yeah, thanks. I didn't want to steal Rick's thunder, but a compelling rationale for looking at this now is that Ameren will subsidize up to 50% of the price of a any sort of level 2 or level 3 charging station. And so the level 2 ones that charge 20 to 30 miles of charging in an hour, those are only a couple grand or a few grand. And there's an incredibly strong case to make for that, particularly if we do point of sale, because we could recoup that investment and be not be behind the curve. Now, level 3 is more of a business decision with those advantages that Mr. Garetano and others have mentioned. But Ameren is all in on charging stations, and the advantage of dealing with this contractor to do the work is not only do we get 50% off the bottom line, we also get a 30% tax credit that they can rebate partially to us, because they're buying the units wholesale, taking the tax credit, and then selling them to us and folding that into our discount. So it's really cost effective right now. And I could hear Larry Brost's words in my head about, internet, and should we be spending money on something like a charging station and whatnot. But EVs are coming, and we might as well get ahead of it. And to Lauren's point, finally, the garage is a convenient place. The police park in there, everybody parks there. It's centrally located, and we did look quite a bit at Town Center, and that's the spot. From a variety of technical reasons, et cetera.
Councilmember Bertolino.
Yeah, do you need a motion on this, Joe, to kind of pull it all together? I think this is
I think the motion would probably be just at this point to continue to proceed with the research on this, and then we should hopefully get an update at the next meeting with more detail. Plus, anyway, this is the kind of stuff we're going to need to know when we get into talking about the budgeting to figure out what needs to be put aside for it.
Okay, I'd like to make a motion then that we direct the city administrator, with the assistance of Councilmember Rambo and Councilmember Edens, to come up with recommendations on this idea to be presented to this committee within, what do you need, 30 days, 60 days?
I think we can do it in 30 days. What do you think, Rick?
Yeah, we're well along that path.
All right, let's say 30 days. That's my motion.
All right, so there's a motion on the floor. Is there a second? Councilmember Rambo is seconding it. Any other questions or comments on the motion? Seeing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? All right, the motion passes. All right, next item on the agenda is number 3. This is pertaining to what was discussed at the last city council meeting, which is the lobbyist, or looking at a lobbyist for the city. So there is no memorandum, but again, just a reminder, this came up during discussion that there are ARPA, which is recovery, I believe, funds that have been granted by the federal government to the state for infrastructure projects. So the state has a chunk of money. This is separate from what the cities will receive. And so this was prompted that we had become aware that other cities are looking at trying to get some of that funding for some type of infrastructure work. And they have engaged in lobbyists. And so the question that is being presented and was deferred here to this committee is that should we proceed with starting to look at the process of identifying who that lobbyist would be. And so therefore, as the need arises, we would have that information ready to go and proceed. And just to give you some background, we have engaged with lobbyists in our past. If you recall, there was the pool tax issue several years ago. And so the city did have a contract with the lobbyist. However, at the time, shortly thereafter, a new council came on. Their position was that we did not need a lobbyist anymore and would just rely on the collective efforts of the leagues like the Municipal League and the Muni. However, those are very beneficial when these are mutual efforts that we're working with in other cities. But like in the case where you heard about Chesterfield, they're looking specifically for money for Chesterfield. So a league isn't going to look just at that and supporting that kind of effort there. It doesn't support the overall population. So therefore, that's what the ask was. So at this point, the committee, we do not have any information, but what we can proceed with, if this motion were to sound good to folks and someone could be happy to make it, would be a motion that we would start to identify a pool of lobbyists, and it could be a couple that we may want to research, maybe interview, bring into this committee, ask questions, and obviously understand how they work, what they could do for the city, what their level of representation is at the Capitol, the relationships that they have, and how they would be able to help the city. And in that case, try to make sure that we have that arrangement there ready. And then certainly we can either engage with them on specific situations when needed, or, in some cases like Chesterfield, they pay for their own lobbyist all year round. So that's where I think we can end up going with this. But again, we don't have any memo at this point. So this is just a new item that came from council. So I saw two hands up, Councilmember Edens and then Bertolino. Councilmember Edens.
First, Katie dropped off. She's trying to rejoin and she's stuck as an attendee, so she needs to be back over to a panelist.
Oh, good. Thank you.
Yep, I think she's been sitting in council purgatory over there for quite a bit. But I did just want to say, and I know Dan's on here as well. I was one of the ones that was hoping to see this a couple of years ago, and just as a response to the notion that lobbyists can be icky, and they certainly can, and we do know that there's money involved in politics. But I will say this, and I disclosed it before the first time I ran, but I have been a registered lobbyist before down in Jeff City. I was really proud of the work I did, begging for money for higher education for University of Missouri system students. So although the word lobbyist can be scary, just remember it's pretty much everyone has one. One of my really good friends was the lobbyist for American Cancer Society. So what we want to think about this word as, because we're not greasing palms, we're not big money, we're not yucky. We want to think about lobbyist as an advocate. So do we need an advocate? Yeah, I think we do. I've seen how Jeff City works, and the squeaky wheel gets the appropriation, and that means you have to have somebody down there and be on top of it and report back as well. And there are other certainly legislation tracking apps that we can make sure that our lobbyist has and try to get a membership on so that we can keep track of things ourselves. But I've been there, done that. I've seen it. I've seen how it works. I believe we need it. And so again, advocate, not just not just lobbyists. And there is an ethics form. You have to register with the Missouri Ethics Commission. We do have to disclose what we spend as well. So don't think it's a big deal.
Okay, and we have Councilmember Berlino and Dodwell.
Yeah, my 2 cents, committee, is that we should listen to whatever lobbyists want to represent us and hear what they have to say. On the other hand, we've been down this route before. We are just, one community within the state of Missouri, and how much influence can one lobbyist with one community have, I think, is minimal, in my opinion. And so from what I've seen in the past, they're not worth the money we pay them. On the other hand, we have 3 representatives and 1 senator that represent portions or all of the portions of our city. I don't think we're leveraging those representatives hardly enough, or hard enough. Is that the word? Do we really try and leverage those 3 plus our senator to represent Wildwood interest? And I don't think we've done enough to really push that. So my recommendation is, yes, let's hear from lobbyists and what they can do. But on the other hand, I'm saying I'm not real sure they're worth their money.
So it's interesting. I was down in Jeff City about 2-3 weeks ago. I've been going down there quite a bit. In fact, yesterday there was something that was being discussed that I was notified last night at the Capitol. So yes, we do have representatives. It's important to have relationships. I was, the last time I was there about 2-3 weeks ago, it was really nice. I had one of the representatives who said, I'm really glad you stopped by, because you don't come by when you need something. You come by all the time. So that matters to our representatives, right? We just don't want to be the ones that are going to them when we need help. The lobbyist, I think, well, in the example of Chesterfield, they were able to get the pool tax formula changed. And that was 1 lobbyist in 1 city versus 80 something. Well, how many municipalities in St. Louis County? About 80, something like that. And then, of course, the ones that are in the pool tax. So we lost out on that one. We took a loss. And so that is, see, that's what you're up against, because we can't be at Jefferson City every day, stopping into these offices to talk with them. And that's the advantage that a city has, I think, when you have somebody that's lobbying on your behalf. They have the relationships and they are there. They're the eyes and ears for the city. So when we have an issue, like, let's say, for example, we want to get that money that is recovery money for internet. If we really want to put all our weight behind it, then we need someone who can go to battle for us at the Capitol while we're here, because otherwise who's going to be able to go to those committee meetings when you find out the night before, hey, it's coming up in committee, because it does happen, and who's going to testify on behalf? So that's where the lobbyist comes in. They're there, they represent you, and they speak on your behalf. And you could see that when you look at the bills, you will see whose lobbyist was there. Example, Chesterfield, because they have their own. So because I thought when I first read it, I'm like, wow, they're there all the time. I wonder who's making that drive. It's not them. It's the lobbyist that's speaking, that's providing the witness form and speaking in the hearing. So I think for specific issues like this, like let's say there's a pot of money, that I think is important, because then, we've got a chance. Otherwise, we're going to be up against those areas, those cities that do have one. And I've heard that come up, where we have conflicting issues. Let's say, for example, and this is a true story. I mean, there's an item that I went to speak on, and a certain representative was, taking a different point of view, and it's because the lobbyist. That's what I'm up against. Now, some of the issues that are concerned, Clean Missouri was passed by the voters. So the most that I think a lobbyist could do right now is get up to $5, give a representative as a cup of coffee, $5. Clean Missouri eliminated all the free tickets to the games, the dinners, all that kind of stuff that you might remember lobbyists, hearing what lobbyists do. Clean Missouri apparently has just completely leveled the playing field for people who do not have lobbyists and lobbyists. So the lobbyist there really is the one that's just there speaking on your behalf. So that's what I could share from my experience and what I've heard. Councilmember Dodwell.
I just wanted to speak. I'm very good. I'm very good. It's been a long day, guys. Sorry. Plus, I've been falling in and out here. I know that our last lobbyist was not as effective and had some business acumen that we were a little concerned about. I won't go into those details, but I think if we can interview the correct lobbyist, I would wholeheartedly agree that we need to get somebody specifically now to talk about the additional funding available that could be utilized for our internet upgrades as part of the current president's gift, so to speak, from the federal tax base. So I would fully support that. I think we need to start interviewing someone, not someone, someones. And I would hope that Ms. Edens might have some recommendations on who we could reach out to in order to find qualified individuals that we can assess a little bit more effectively. When we had the last lobbyist, we had, I think, him and maybe one other person. And we took the best of two questionables. And I think that was a mistake at that time.
All right. Are there any other hands up? So at this point right now, again, the question that's being posed, or at least maybe a motion that would be, is again, just proceed with the identifying a lobbyist, and then we can handle this. I think we can handle this as a committee. I don't know if there was a subcommittee the last time, but rather than duplicate and have extra committees, subcommittees, we can just handle it here. And if we can get a short list presented with some background information, then this committee hopefully can just kind of check off which ones they'd like to see, and maybe we can arrange them to come on to Zoom to talk more about themselves, what they can offer for the city, and see if, they'd be able to help us with getting some of that, like, let's say, internet funds or things of nature that would help our residents. So Councilmember Rambo.
Yeah, just real quickly, it seems that time may be of the essence here. If we're going to do it, we probably should try to do it just as fast as we can. And that general approach, 30 days to get some names, and then another 30 days before they come back and talk to us, and then another 30 days before we have a proposal. That's kicking it out to midsummer. And I'm not sure, I don't like the idea of lobbyists. I love Lauren's description of them as advocates. That feels lots better to me. It's the same group of people, but it's more palatable. And I think if we're going to do it, we probably should figure out ways to make it as fast a process as possible. So is it possible to just get those recommendations and have the people actually come to the next meeting or something like that? Does anyone? Yeah, go ahead.
You raised a good point. So if we could do that, maybe what we could do is, if you want to email, maybe I'll ask the city administrator if you can help with this. If you can keep track of a list. We can either, if anyone does have anyone that you're aware of, send it to the city administrator. We'll develop a short list, send it back to you all by perhaps email. That way, we can cut some of the time in between and try to get some of that work before we have our next meeting. So potentially we may even be able to invite somebody to the next meeting, one or two people or something like that. Steve Cross, what do you think?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple things. First of all, yes, if you have any any recommended lobbyists or those that that you're aware of, yes, please send them to me. I was on a call with the mayor just before joining on the Zoom call. He wants to meet with Chair Garetano and myself. He has some ideas about a lobbyist as well. One of the things I would like to share with you, however, as it relates to timing, and I will summarize this in an email or in a memorandum rather for the council meeting on Monday, because you all recall that I was asked to prepare a memorandum as to what Chesterfield did in terms of getting a lobbyist. There are a number of pots of money that everyone is chasing. First of all, with regards to the American Recovery Plan, those monies are already set aside. There's nothing that the city needs to do. A lobbyist is not going to do anything. It's already identified how much money that the city will receive, and we'll get 50% of it on the first tranche and 50% of it 12 months beyond that for the second tranche. That number right now is about $6.5 million. No lobbyist is going to change that number. It's already set aside. It goes to the state and it comes to us. So there's no urgency there. There's nothing a lobbyist can do for us. There is money that is going to go to the state. And in that particular case, there potentially, although there are some that disagree, from the Metro League of St. Louis in terms of whether a lobbyist would help the city do something that we couldn't ourselves do in terms of partnering with the state to get some monies out of their portion of the ARP money. The primary function of the lobbyist that at least Chesterfield thinks has to do with the president's infrastructure bill. That is a $2 trillion bill that we could use for broadband or watershed and so forth. That is a year or more away before any of those monies would be seen. So with regards to timing, I agree that let's move this forward as quickly as we can, but I don't want you all to think that we're going to lose out on monies because we don't have a lobbyist. Not the case. We may want to see how we want to approach that infrastructure. For instance, Chesterfield is using it to put in water lines and things like that out Highway 40 corridor. And again, it's pretty broad in terms of what we could use that for, from broadband to other things. But it's that piece of legislation is way out there. There's a lot of debate going on about that before we would ever see any of those. It's at least a year away. So the internet, there's a pot of money that's coming to us. It'll be up to you all and the rest of council to decide what we want to do with that amount of money that ought to be coming soon, and how we want to allocate that. But doesn't take a lobbyist to get it. It's already done.
Does this need a motion, Joe?
I think it would be good if we just get a motion to. Yep.
Okay, so I'm going to try. I would like to make a motion that Mr. Cross, Mr. Garetano, Mr. Bolin, and I would think Ms. Edens get together and meet to discuss lobbyists that all of us might submit and come up with a proposal at the next meeting. Steve, that was very helpful, by the way, what you just said. I sort of thought we needed one more quickly than we actually do. So I think we have time to do it right. So is that a reasonable motion?
Okay, Councilmember Dawah, is that a second? All right, any other discussion on the motion? All right, seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Hi.
Any opposed? Any abstain? All right, the motion passes. All right, next on the agenda, we have the final item under for action. This item over here is the item here regarding pickleball courts in the city. So Councilmember Flasher has been very patient sitting here. I'm going to let him speak to it, but let me just kind of set the stage here. So this item, I did send out a memo that was provided to the council back in January at the January meeting. So therefore you will have seen this memo before. Planning and Parks did look at potential projects that could be pursued. So that is on the list, pickleball courts. I did have a conversation with the Director of Planning, Mr. Vunich, about this item here. He seems very optimistic that this is an item that could be a quick win. As far as when we say quick win, and I'm phrasing it quick win, but I think in terms of from a financial perspective, not a whole lot of cost if we have a flat piece of ground and if there's already that ground in an existing park. So Mr. Vunich said there was some areas that had been looked at for this kind of purpose, and it seems like this would be something that could be probably turned around. I wouldn't say quickly, but I think it's a smaller project, and I don't want to quote him, but I feel like he said less than 100,000. So we don't have right now this budgeted, and it's certainly in the purview of really planning and parks. But Mr. Flasher, who was a member of Admin Public Works, last time he said, hey, can we talk about it? So I think at this point right now, I'm going to let him speak, but if there is a motion, it'd probably be just a motion endorsing, again, pursuing this kind of option here regarding looking at pickleball courts in the city. And just so you know, there is, at least I'll just share from my perspective, it is something I've heard numerous times from residents, adults, primarily seniors, people going to other places to play pickleball because we just don't have it here. And it sounds like it's a combination of like tennis, ping pong, and badminton or something like that. So I will, Tracy, you might know more about it than I do. Well, anyway, Dan, this is your chance if you want to mention it. And again, I don't think we'll have a whole lot really to debate here, but more maybe just an endorsement to convey that message that we're supportive of it.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. Like you said, we had talked about it back in January, which kind of put it on the radar. And I mentioned to you, hey, this kind of fell at the wayside. How can we get it going again? And I, like you, hear about it all the time. Nathan and I live in a subdivision where we have access to that stuff within our neighborhood, and especially in homeowner associations. But there's still a lot of people that don't have easy access to it unless they travel outside of the Wildwood limits. And I think that we would need a tennis court that has pickleball capabilities. I don't think we should restrict it to just pickleball personally. I also think it'd be nice to have basketball courts, but that maybe I'm just a dreamer with that stuff. I don't know. And then once Joe put something out on Facebook and I shared it, and I started getting a lot of feedback back about skate parks and things like that. I don't know if that's going a little too extreme here, but I do know that there's a desire for recreational activity within our city, more so. And the skate park idea was revolving around like your middle school to high school age kids, something for them to do to stay out of trouble type of mindset. But they can play basketball and tennis and pickleball too. So yeah, that's all. I just want to put it back on the radar. And if the funding is available, I think it'd be a great thing to add to our city. Thanks.
All right, Councilmember Rambo.
Yeah, I'm going to lead up to a motion here. I would like us to start thinking of this in terms of hard surface courts. The tennis courts can be made into pickleball courts quite easily. You can have a half court basketball. You can have lots of things in the same little concentrated area. And I think that's really what we're talking about, not just pickleball. Pickleball is a bit limiting. I think it's a big win for the city. We don't have anything like it. We have plenty of parks and trails, and I'd love to see more. But this is a facility that we don't offer, and I think it's really important, especially for younger folks. I've completely and wholeheartedly support it. I think we all also ought to consider sand volleyball, maybe at Community Park near the playground, because it doesn't take up much space. It's even cheaper. And those are quite popular in the summer with people, pavilion rentals and so forth. And so I don't know how to put this, but to look at, maybe the motion would be to look at hard surface court options and get a report back at the next meeting or something to that effect.
Well, can I help with that? Maybe we could.
Yeah.
Since it is technically, I would say planning and parks.
Mhm.
Maybe this is just a motion that the Admin Public Works Committee endorses the idea of pickleball and other hard courts. And we can send that over to planning and parks to make sure it stays on their radar and that we make good progress there. Does that sound?
Sure.
All right.
Yeah, sure.
So I need a second for that motion. Is there a second? Councilmember Hopper? All right, so we got a motion on the floor. Is there any question, anything about the motion here? All right, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Opposed?
We got one opposed. Any abstentions? All right, well, that is it then. We don't have any other for action items. We've got a couple of not ready for action that we'll continue to work through. Miscellaneous, the only question I have, I'm just going to seek input. Again, just trying to see how we can move, keep meeting times a little bit earlier, so meetings end earlier, but also our staff can get home while it's still daylight, as it is right now in Steve Cross's office. So is 5:30 acceptable for the next meeting? Is there anybody that would run into a problem? All right, I'm not seeing any, so it looks like we'll continue to do this. And then the next meeting's June 8th. So motion to adjourn. Is there someone? Oh, wait a minute. We've got Steve Cross. Hand up.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to remind you, I mentioned it to you in an email when we were pulling this agenda together. I will be out of town on the 8th of June, so I will not be available for the next meeting if it's on the 8th.
So I think we've got maybe we need to look at, but I thought we might have some stuff that depends on having you available to speak to it, right? I mean, what's coming back to us?
There are a couple things, so I wanted to bring it up. I don't want the committee to change a date just because of me, but if that's a possibility, I at least wanted to throw that out anyway, that Judy and I will be out of town the week of the 7th.
Well, why don't we do this? How about if the committee's flexible, we can send an email with some potential dates and get input. If that's an alternative, we can reschedule. And that way that would work with Mr. Cross, and as long as it works with everyone, we could do that. Or Councilmember Dodwell, you got your hand up?
I was just going to see if we could make a motion here and change the date to the 1st of June, since that's not going to be a meeting week anyway. Or is that going to put the city in jeopardy, Mr. Cross?
Let me take a look here real quick.
So that would be June 1st.
Right, the only other meeting that week is on Wednesday is the Wildwood Celebration Commission. But other than that, there isn't, so.
That's the day after Memorial Day, so that's probably why we have it scheduled.
No, thank you. I didn't look at that.
Well, it depends. Is that going to be a problem for anyone? Are you going to be, anyone traveling out of town Memorial Day weekend that you're going to be out Tuesday? Lauren's got her hands up. So I'm not seeing any. Larry, you're not hitting the road? No, he's good. Well, it seems like June 1st could be then an option for us, and we've got plenty of time to adjust the calendar. So
I'd like to make that motion.
all right, there's a motion made by, seconded by Councilmember Bertolino. Any questions, any opposed? All right, so all those in favor, say aye. Oh, wait, actually, you know what? It's not technically on the agenda, so we can't really, I think, vote on it. I don't know, city administrator, is that okay? I want to make sure we're following the rules.
It's not on the agenda, and so you can't vote on a change in time. I think Mr. Young can jump in here, but I think we had that with another committee where they tried to do it, and we could not. You can discuss it, but you can't take a vote on it if it's not on the agenda.
All right, I think we've.
You can send it out as an email later.
As chair, I think we'll have
Okay.
the ability to just adjust it. But yeah, let's not pursue that vote since it is technically not on the agenda. So fair enough, got enough information on that. Thank you, Katie. All right, I think we're done here. Thank you for everything, but let's get a motion to adjourn. Made by Councilmember Dodwell, seconded by Councilmember Bros. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Hi.
Oppose, any abstain? All right, motion passes. The meeting's adjourned. Thanks, everyone.
Night, everyone.
Good night. See you.
Good
Bye,
night.
everybody.
Good meeting, Joe.
Good meeting.